I'd been looking forward to diving in Belize for months. The Blue Hole had been on my list for years, one of those places you read about and daydream over but don't really expect to see with your own eyes. When I finally got there, the water was that perfect turquoise you see in travel magazines. Warm air, smooth waves, sun overhead. It looked calm from the surface, like a postcard. You'd never guess what was underneath. There were only 4 of us on the dive, me, the guide, and a couple from Oregon. We'd already done a shallower dive that morning, just to get used to the water and our gear. This was the deeper one, the one that dropped us into the real Blue Hole. The guide gave us the usual rundown: depth limits, air checks, signals. He was firm about staying above the dark zone, where natural light from the surface still reached. "Don't go past the light," he said. "You lose orientation fast down there. Easy to drift." The descent started normally. We dropped slowly, watching the colors fade around us as we went deeper. The coral shelf was massive, almost like a cliff underwater. Bright fish darted in and out of cracks in the wall. At around 80 feet, we reached the lip where everything just fell away. It wasn't gradual. One moment there was a wall of reef, and then it was just gone, black, like staring into the mouth of something ancient and bottomless. We hovered there for a bit, taking it in. The water was still, no current. I could hear my breathing and the distant pop of bubbles escaping to the surface. The others stayed close to the edge, shining their lights down, but not venturing farther. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe I just wanted to feel like I was really in it. I drifted forward, kicking down a few more feet to get a better look. The dark felt thick. Even with my dive light, I couldn't see far, just a narrow beam cutting through murk. I remember feeling small, like I'd left the world above entirely. Then my light flickered, just a brief pulse. Then it went completely black. I froze. My heart rate spiked, and for a second I couldn't tell which way was up. I forced myself to stay calm, counted a few seconds, and tapped the light. Came back on, weak but steady. I turned in a slow circle, searching for the others. They were gone. No bubbles, no fins, no light beams. Nothing but the curve of the reef wall beside me and the open dark behind and below. I couldn't even hear the familiar hiss of a regulator. It was like I'd slipped out of sync with them somehow, like they were never there. I hovered for a few seconds, trying to think. My training told me not to panic. I kept my breathing slow and steady, checked my gauges. Still had plenty of air. I was disoriented but not deep enough to be in danger yet. The plan was simple: follow the reef wall up slowly. The guide had said to treat it like a rope in the dark. It would lead me back to the light. As I started my ascent, I kept the wall on my right and moved slowly. My light cut across rock, coral, little sea fans clinging to the wall. I checked above me constantly, hoping to catch a glimpse of the others. Then I saw the bubbles. They were rising fast, maybe a few feet in front of me, coming from somewhere deeper. A steady stream, like someone was exhaling below me. It made no sense. I stopped and pointed my light down, following the trail. Nothing, just empty water. But the bubbles kept rising. Not in bursts like a freed tank might release, these were steady, like someone breathing normally. I hovered in place, trying to make sense of it. If someone was down there, they weren't shining a light. I should have been able to see something, a flicker of movement, a silhouette. But it was just dark, silent, and those bubbles kept coming. I waited a few seconds, then slowly resumed my ascent. The stream of bubbles continued to pass me, like I was following someone I couldn't see. I kept looking down, but there was no diver, no equipment, nothing I could identify. Just that rising trail. At around 50 feet, the water started getting brighter. I was entering the light zone again. Still no sign of the others. I surfaced about 5 minutes later, breathing hard, heart racing. The dive boat bobbed a short distance away. As I pulled myself up the ladder, I saw them already on board. The couple looked fine, relaxed. The guide was scanning the water with a tense look on his face. I sat on the bench, pulled off my fins, and tried to catch my breath. I didn't say anything right away. Eventually, I asked if anyone had gone below me after I drifted forward. The couple looked confused. They said they'd seen me move away, but when they looked back, I wasn't there. They'd assumed I was still nearby. The guide didn't say much, just sat there staring at the water, lips pressed tight. I told him about the light flicker, how I lost sight of everyone, and the bubbles rising past me. I described them as clearly as I could. Where they were, how steady they were, how long they kept coming. That's when the guide's expression changed. His face went pale and he looked away for a long time. Didn't say anything at first. Eventually, he stood up and started packing up the gear. We didn't do the second dive we'd planned. No one argued. That night, back at the small dive lodge, I kept going over it. Tried to rationalize. Could have been a pocket of trapped air escaping from the reef. Maybe a busted tank someone had lost. Maybe bubbles get weird down there. But that steady rhythm, that pattern, it didn't feel random. It felt deliberate, like breathing. I stayed up most of the night, listening to the waves outside the window, thinking about how deep that hole really goes. Hundreds of feet, pitch black. People have died down there chasing depths they weren't ready for. Some bodies never found. I didn't dive again after that trip. I still think about it sometimes, though, those bubbles coming up from the dark. Something alive or something left behind, maybe. I don't know, but I've never felt that kind of quiet before. The kind where you realize you're not just alone. You're in a place where no one can reach you and nothing has to follow rules. Whatever was breathing down there, I never saw it, but it knew the way up, and it stayed below. Off the coast of North Carolina, there's a place they call the Graveyard of the Atlantic. Hundreds of wrecks sit down there, many from World War II. Me and my dive buddy, Kyle, had been talking about diving one of the more famous ones for months. A World War II freighter that went down in '42, 100 feet to the bottom. Stable, well known. Divers visited it all the time. It wasn't supposed to be dangerous. We went out with a small dive charter, just 6 divers total including us, plus the captain and a deckhand. The water was calm, skies clear. It was a textbook day for diving. Kyle and I had done deeper dives before. We were both advanced certified, knew how to handle ourselves underwater. We went over the plan with the charter guys, double-checked our gear, and then rolled off the side of the boat. We descended slowly, equalizing every few feet. The deeper we got, the darker it became. The water shifted from blue to a kind of washed-out green. The sunlight thinned until it was just a murky glow above us. Then the wreck came into view, a long, rusted outline on the sand. You don't forget the way a shipwreck looks. It rises from the seabed like a skeleton, metal bones half swallowed by silt and coral. Life teemed around it. Schools of fish darted in and out of the broken hull. Sea fans swayed from the deck like tattered curtains. We landed at the bow and checked each other's gear one more time. Air was good, suits were sealed. Everything clipped where it should be. Kyle gave a thumbs up. I returned it. Then we started exploring. The outside of the wreck was beautiful in a strange, eerie way. Big chunks of the freighter had collapsed in over the years, exposing hallways and rooms. We stayed outside at first, moving slowly, careful not to stir up silt. Visibility was about 20 feet, decent but not perfect. Every now and then, a barracuda would flash by or a grouper would hover in place and watch us. Then Kyle pointed to an opening in the hull, one of the interior access points. It was a square cutout just above the seabed, with a few corroded bars running across the top. He signaled to go in. I hesitated for a second, then followed. It wasn't unusual. Wreck penetration was something we'd done before, and this freighter was supposed to be structurally sound. Inside, it felt different. The light dropped even more. We had our torches, but the beams only went so far. The metal walls absorbed the sound of our bubbles, made everything feel closer. We moved slowly down what looked like an old cargo corridor. Rust flakes drifted off the walls when we passed. A few fish, tiny ones, darted out of the way as we floated through. We reached a narrower hallway that split off from the main one. The walls were lined with rusted doors, some hanging half open, probably crew quarters or storage rooms. Kyle signaled that he was going to check one out. He kicked gently forward and disappeared inside. I hovered just outside the door, keeping an eye on my depth and air. I watched a small school of silvery fish spiral lazily past, their scales catching the light from my torch. Then I realized Kyle hadn't come back. I waited a full minute, maybe more. No movement inside. I peeked into the room. Empty. Just rust, shadows, and a couple of broken pipes along the ceiling. My first thought was that he'd gone deeper in through another doorway. I floated into the room, shining my torch around. Nothing. But at the far side of the room, there was another passage. Narrow, dark, looked like it connected to a lower level or some inner part of the ship. I hesitated. My air was just under halfway. Not dangerous, but not ideal for exploring blindly. Still, I didn't want to surface without him. I moved forward. The corridor beyond was tighter than I expected. Barnacles had grown thick along the walls. It was clear nobody had been in this part of the wreck in a while. I had to angle my body to squeeze through some of the tighter sections. The light from my torch jittered across jagged metal, broken wires hanging like seaweed. Every few seconds I called out Kyle's name through the regulator. Just a muffled blast of bubbles and noise. No answer. My heart rate was climbing, and I knew I needed to manage my breathing. I checked my air again, getting lower. I shone my torch down another hallway, nothing but shadows and dust suspended in the water. Then I heard it, a metallic bang. It echoed down the corridor behind me, not loud but sharp, like a door slamming slowly shut. I whipped around. The way I'd come in the first room was behind me. The door we'd entered through was swinging. It didn't slam, it didn't lock, but it was clearly moving, as if it had been nudged or pulled. I didn't wait to check anything else. I swam hard back toward it, scraping my tank against the wall as I squeezed back through the tight spaces. I reached the doorway and shoved the rusted panel wide again, pushed through, and exited into the larger room. I looked around quickly, but Kyle wasn't there. No trail, no bubbles, nothing. I hovered there, just breathing, trying to make sense of it. He'd gone in. He hadn't come out. I'd followed, heard nothing, seen nothing. Only that metal door moving. I waited 5 minutes, maybe more, watching the entrance, hoping. I shone my torch back down the hallway several times, called out again and again. Nothing, just water and rust. Eventually, I had no choice. My air was low. I kicked up and out of the freighter, back through the opening in the hull, and headed for the surface. As I rose, I scanned the area around the wreck. No movement, no bubbles. When I surfaced, I yelled for the boat. The deckhand helped me on board. The first thing I said was that my buddy was missing. The captain didn't waste time. He radioed the Coast Guard, then suited up another diver and sent him down with a guideline. We waited on the deck, pacing, scanning the water. I was still dripping, my wetsuit half off, clutching my fins. The second diver was down for about 20 minutes. When he surfaced, he looked pale. He shook his head before he even climbed the ladder. He said the interior of the wreck was empty. No sign of Kyle. No bubbles, no stuck gear, no tank, no movement. Nothing. Like he'd never been there. The Coast Guard sent divers later that day. They did a full sweep. Still nothing. The currents hadn't picked up. Visibility stayed decent all day. No trace. Not a fin, not a strap. Nothing. They logged it as a lost diver incident. Said he must have taken a wrong turn inside and gotten trapped. Or maybe panicked and slipped into a collapsed section. Could have been anything. But I know something made that door close. I saw it. The way it moved, slow, steady, not from current. There was no surge. And that hallway he went down, it didn't look like it had been disturbed in years. No footprints in the silt. No hand marks on the walls. I don't think he got lost. I think something happened in there. Something we didn't see. Something that made him disappear without a trace. And I'll never forget how quiet it was after he vanished. Just the sound of my own bubbles and the creak of that door behind me. I haven't wreck dived since. I still dive sometimes in open water with a group, but I don't go into ships anymore. Not after that. We entered the water just after noon. It was a spring-fed system in northern Florida, crystal clear on the surface, cold, about 68 degrees. I was with 2 other divers, both experienced, both calm. We'd planned this cave dive for weeks. Cave diving is different from open water. It's not just about depth, it's about overhead environment, limited exits, and total reliance on equipment and planning. There's no going straight up if something goes wrong. You have to come back the way you came. We checked our reels, gear, tanks. Our primary line was set just inside the cave mouth, secured to a solid rock tie-off. We all had safety spools and backups, redundant lights. We each had over 2/3 of our gas supply set aside for the return trip. The plan was conservative, no deeper than 60 feet, a maximum penetration of 400 feet in, and absolutely no deviations from the main line. The cave started wide and beautiful. The entrance chamber opened into a long tunnel shaped like a flattened oval, maybe 8 feet high and 10 wide. The walls were a light tan limestone, smooth in some places, jagged in others. The water was clear at first, with visibility easily 100 feet. It was almost surreal, moving slowly through the still water. The only sound the hiss of your own regulator and the low gurgle of bubbles rising behind you. We moved single file. I was second. Our team leader was in front with the main reel. The third diver, Ben, brought up the rear. As we moved deeper, the tunnel began to narrow. Not dangerously tight, but enough that we had to be careful with our fins. One careless kick and you'd stir up silt from the floor or ceiling, which could drop visibility to 0. That was always in the back of my mind. Around the 300-foot mark, we passed a T-junction. The line went right, which was part of the plan. We paused to check our gauges and pressure. Everything was normal, no problems. The light from our dive lights cut through the water in narrow cones, throwing shadows on the rock walls. We kept going. I don't know exactly when I lost sight of the line. We were passing through a tighter section, single file, a slow turn to the left. I was focused on staying off the floor, keeping my breathing slow and regular. At one point, I looked up and realized I couldn't see the guideline. I stopped, hovering in place, thinking maybe I just needed to adjust my angle. I turned slowly in place, careful not to stir up the silt. Still nothing. I kicked backward gently, thinking maybe I drifted off a little. No sign of it, just rock walls, silt, and a growing feeling of confusion. I turned and flashed my light at the diver behind me. Ben was still there, watching me. I gave the hand signal for line. He shrugged, then pointed in a vague direction behind him. We both looked forward and saw the team leader had stopped as well. He came back to us and we all communicated with hand signs. None of us could see the line. We tried to stay calm. This was exactly the kind of thing we trained for. We each had reels. We could lay a new line back toward the entrance. But it was strange. We hadn't turned off or strayed. The main line should have still been there. We decided to backtrack. The 3 of us fanned out slightly in the tunnel, each sweeping our lights carefully over the walls and floor, trying to spot the white guideline. It should have stood out easily. But the water was changing, getting cloudy. I realized someone must have kicked up some silt, even being careful. Visibility started dropping fast, from 20 feet to 10, then 5. It was like a slow fog rolling in. We stopped. I could feel my breathing getting faster. I forced it down. Panicking underwater doesn't help. It burns through air and clouds your thinking. We gathered close and signaled again. Still no line. The silt was thick now, maybe a foot of visibility, sometimes less. Like swimming in dirty milk. That's when someone, Ben, I think, signaled to kill our lights. Total darkness. The idea was that sometimes, in very silty conditions, a light will reflect off the suspended particles and make things worse. By shutting them off for a minute, your eyes might adjust and you could catch the faint glow of a guideline if it had reflective markers. It was a long minute. The second my light went off, everything vanished. No tunnel, no divers, no direction. Just black. I couldn't even see my own hand. I tried to hover still, not move at all. You don't want to bump into anyone, or worse, lose your orientation. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Every few seconds, I'd hear the bubbles from someone else exhaling. That was the only sound. Then I heard it. A voice. Not through my comms, those weren't even active. It wasn't in my head either. It was faint, like something carried on the current. Garbled, slowed down, like someone trying to speak underwater without a regulator. Just one word. This way. I froze. I didn't even turn toward it at first. I just stayed still, trying to tell myself it was some echo or my mind playing tricks. But it came again. Same direction. Same low tone. Closer. This way. I fumbled for my light and turned it on. The line was right in front of me, bright white, hanging inches from my mask. It hadn't been there a second ago. Or maybe it had, and I just hadn't seen it in the dark. I reached out and grabbed it with both hands. Ben and the team leader flicked their lights back on too. I waved to get their attention, then pointed at the line. They both moved closer, expressions unreadable behind their masks. We each clipped our safety reels to it, confirmed our direction, and started back. The return trip felt longer than it should have. The silt hadn't cleared, so even with the line in hand, we had to move slowly, feeling our way through the soup. I counted every kick, every breath. When we finally saw the glow of daylight coming through the entrance, I nearly cried into my regulator. We surfaced one by one. The air felt hot after the cold of the spring. I pulled off my mask and just floated there for a minute, staring at the tree canopy above. We didn't talk much during the gear strip down. We were all shaken. Not from the dive itself, we'd made it out fine, but from the moment we lost that line. That was the one rule. Always know where the line is. If you lose it, you lose your exit. Back at the trucks, while we were drying off and logging our dive times, I finally said it. I heard something, down there, when we had our lights off. The team leader didn't say anything. He just looked at me, eyes narrowed slightly, like he wasn't surprised. Ben turned his head slowly and said, "What?" "I heard a voice," I said. "A whisper. It said, 'This way,' twice." Ben stared at me, his face pale. He didn't answer. After a long pause, the team leader just nodded once, almost like he was confirming something for himself. Then he turned back to his gear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. Not because I thought it was a ghost or something. I don't believe in that crap. But because I know what nitrogen narcosis can do, even at shallow depths. I know how stress and fear twist the brain. I also know what I heard. We checked our dive footage the next day. GoPro mounted on the lead diver's helmet. The video was clear until the moment we stopped to look for the line. After that, just haze and shadows. But at one point, right before I turned my light on, you can hear something faint, like a whisper, picked up on the mic, distorted, hard to make out. No one's admitted anything since, but I know what I heard, and I won't dive caves again. I had been free diving near that reef for a while, maybe 2 years on and off. It was about an hour boat ride off the coast, out in the Gulf of Mexico. Not many people went that far out unless they were fishing commercially or diving for something specific. The reef itself wasn't marked on any of the basic GPS maps, but the local guys who'd been out here long enough all knew it existed. It sat maybe 30 feet below the surface at its shallowest and dropped down into deeper ledges and overhangs. Ideal terrain for grouper, snapper, and sometimes even lionfish. I'd found it randomly one trip, just scanning the sonar and noticing the depth jump and the structure beneath. After that, it became my go-to spot. That day started like any other. I loaded up the boat just after sunrise. The sky was clear, the water flat as glass. I brought along my usual gear, long fins, mask, weight belt, and my spear gun. I had 3 water bottles, a cooler with ice, and a few energy bars. No one else knew where I was going. I liked it that way. Out there, it was just me and the ocean. No voices, no people, no problems. I anchored in my usual spot, just on the edge of the reef where it started to drop down. Visibility was good, better than usual, actually. I could see maybe 50 feet in all directions, with sunlight piercing down in shafts that lit up the coral. Fish moved in and out of the cracks, and the water had that clear blue tint that makes everything seem calm, even when it's not. I did a few warm-up dives, just breathing slowly, diving to around 30 feet, holding it for a minute, then coming back up. After about 10 minutes, I was ready to start hunting. I loaded the spear gun and kicked down along the reef wall, scanning the holes and ledges for movement. It didn't take long. A fat grouper darted out from under a ledge maybe 40 feet down and hovered just long enough for me to line up a shot. I pulled the trigger and the spear struck it clean through the side. It didn't die right away, groupers almost never do. It thrashed, then kicked hard and vanished under the ledge, yanking the shaft and line with it. I kicked down again, following the line. I could see it disappear into a narrow crack under the reef wall, maybe 2 feet high and just wide enough for me to wedge my arm in. I didn't want to leave the fish. It was a good catch, heavy, thick, worth the effort. I floated above the hole, took a few steady breaths to calm my heart, then dove. I got down to the ledge and peered in. The light didn't reach far under there, and all I could see was the tail of the grouper twitching. I hooked one arm around the edge and used my other hand to feel inside, grabbing at the spear's haft. The fish twisted, fighting me, but I had a good grip. I braced my shoulder against the reef and yanked. That's when something else came out with it. It was pale and bloated, wedged deep in the rocks. White fingers curled in a stiff claw, nails blackened, the skin puffed like old rubber. A human hand, detached at the wrist, just bone and soft tissue hanging loose where it had separated. It snagged against the coral as I pulled the spear out, tumbling slightly in the water, almost like it was reaching for me. I dropped everything, the gun, the line, the fish. My heart stopped for a second and then hammered like a drum. I kicked away from the reef, pushing up toward the surface with everything I had. My lungs burned halfway up. I broke the surface coughing hard, gasping for air, spitting seawater. I grabbed the side of the boat and just hung there, arms shaking. For a while, I didn't move. I floated next to the boat, my mask still around my neck, trying to get my breathing under control. I didn't want to go back under. Didn't want to even look down into that blue water. Eventually, I pulled myself aboard and just sat on the deck for a long time, wet and trembling, the sun drying the salt on my skin. I didn't retrieve the spear. I didn't try to get the fish. I left the anchor down, started the engine, and got out of there. Back on shore, I drove straight to the local sheriff's office. They didn't take me seriously at first, just said maybe it was a mannequin hand or a glove or something, until I made them understand what I'd seen. I gave them the GPS coordinates and as much detail as I could. They said they'd look into it. Weeks went by. I tried not to think about it, but it kept coming back. That pale, lifeless hand floating up like it had been caught down there for a long time. I didn't dive again after that. Didn't even take the boat out. About a month later, I got a call from one of the local deputies. They'd sent a dive team out to the reef and recovered multiple human remains. Not a whole body, just parts. A forearm, bits of a rib cage, what they think was part of a pelvis. No wetsuit, no gear, nothing that could clearly ID the person. Nothing that said how long they'd been down there either. Just scattered pieces, half buried in reef rock, some jammed into holes like they'd been stuffed in or pulled. They told me their best guess was a solo diver, maybe years ago, who got trapped under the reef and decomposed. Current and fish probably moved the remains around. Happens more than people think, apparently. You dive alone, you go too deep, get stuck in a tight space, and that's it. No air, no rescue. That explanation made sense on paper, but something about it didn't sit right with me. I've seen what fish do to dead things. I've pulled up fish traps with turtles and bait fish half-eaten. It doesn't look the same. This was different. Some of those bones had been clean, like they'd been broken off, not just chewed. And the way the hand was wedged in there, tightly, like it didn't drift in, it was placed. I thought about going back to check it out again myself. Thought about diving it once more, bringing a light and a camera. But I couldn't do it. Every time I imagined dropping back down into that reef, I felt this crushing pressure in my chest, like I wouldn't come back up, like something would be waiting for me down there. So I let it go. I sold the boat a few months later, gave away my dive gear. People asked me why, and I never gave them the real answer. There's something about the ocean that we'll never understand. It hides things. It swallows them, breaks them apart, scatters them. Maybe it was just a dead diver. Maybe he made a mistake and paid for it. But I was down there, I saw how deep that crack went, how narrow it was, how dark. And I still think, when I grabbed that spear, I wasn't the only one reaching. Something else was holding on. It was a deep dive, the kind of technical dive that not everyone gets certified for. We were about 5 miles off the coast of Andros Island in the Bahamas, dropping down into a known underwater cave system that had been mapped partially but never fully explored. I had trained for this for years, hundreds of dives, classroom hours, controlled decompression work. I wasn't a thrill seeker. I was methodical, careful. I double-checked every piece of my gear before we rolled off the boat. That morning, the sea was calm. The sky was overcast, soft gray clouds moving slowly overhead. There were 3 of us on the boat, but only 2 going down, me and my dive buddy, Mark. The captain stayed topside. Our plan was straightforward: descend to around 130 feet, explore the edge of the cave system without going in, then start our stage descent. Bottom time was planned for under 20 minutes. We had redundancy, backup computers, spare air sources, and extra masks. Everything looked good. The descent was smooth. Water clarity was excellent, probably a good 80 feet of visibility. The water had that electric blue quality that's hard to describe, something between beautiful and bottomless. We passed through thermoclines, the temperature dropping the deeper we went. My heartbeat was steady, and every breath felt controlled. At 100 feet, we paused to check each other's gear. All systems normal. Then we pushed deeper. By the time we reached 130 feet, I felt good. Maybe too good. Crept up slowly, this fuzzy kind of lightness in my head, like I had just taken a long drink after a hard day. I recognized the signs of nitrogen narcosis. I knew them well, but instead of pulling back or signaling discomfort, I remember thinking it wasn't that bad. Everything felt fine. No better than fine. Euphoric. Like I was floating in a dream. It's strange how narcosis tricks you into believing everything is perfect, even as your thinking starts to slip. We moved along the reef wall just at the edge of the cave system. Jagged rock formations jutted out like frozen waves, and inside the shadowed openings, I could see movement. Small fish, maybe a moray eel. I stayed close to Mark, keeping him in my peripheral vision while I scanned the area. I remember glancing down into one of the darker crevices when I saw movement off to my right. Not fish, not a shadow, person. They were about 20 feet away. Black wetsuit, arms and legs moving slowly like they were hovering in place. No tank, no mask, no bubbles, just floating. At first, I thought it was a freediver who had gotten lost, but that didn't make sense at this depth. Then I thought maybe I was seeing a reflection, or even another technical diver whose gear I couldn't make out. But there was no one else scheduled to dive this area today. No other boats nearby, and whoever or whatever I was looking at, they didn't move like a diver. They were too still, too smooth. I lifted my hand and waved, almost without thinking. The figure waved back, the movement slow and identical. Same hand, same arc. It was like I was watching a mirror. But the face, that's what sticks with me. There wasn't one. Or maybe there was, and my brain couldn't process it. Just a blankness where it should have been. No eyes, no expression. Just that dark suit and those steady hands. I turned to get Mark's attention. I tapped my tank, gestured to the side, but by the time I looked back, the figure was gone. No bubbles, no silt trail, no sign anyone had been there at all. I stared at the empty water for a few seconds, heart suddenly thudding harder in my chest. The euphoria was gone, replaced with confusion, unease, and a creeping edge of fear I couldn't shake. I didn't say anything. We were still at max depth, and the last thing I wanted was to cause a panic. We checked our time and started the ascent. That's when things got worse. At around 100 feet, I started to feel like my fingers weren't mine. I looked at my hands, and they seemed far away, like they were floating separately from the rest of my body. I touched my mask, and it didn't feel right. Felt loose, like it wasn't even attached to my face. I tried adjusting it, but that only made things worse. I got this sudden, overwhelming urge to pull it off, to tear it away. Same with the regulator. I wanted it out of my mouth. My gear felt alien, wrong, heavy and foreign. I started tugging at my straps, panic rising fast. My breathing quickened, bubbles rushing upward in loud bursts. I wasn't thinking clearly. The narcosis wasn't gone, it had changed. Shifted from euphoria into something darker. Disconnected. Scary. I remember grabbing at my chest, trying to rip away the weight belt. My hands were shaking. I couldn't tell if I was cold or just scared. Mark saw me. He swam in close, grabbed my wrist, signaled for me to breathe slow. He held up his fingers, tapping them together in the okay sign. I stared back, trying to focus. I nodded barely. He didn't let go. He stayed right next to me, locking eyes with mine the whole time. We stopped at 70 feet for our first decompression stop, and I tried to calm myself. I focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. My brain was foggy, but some part of me knew that if I bolted to the surface, I'd die. Embolism, DCS, or worse. We moved up slowly, stopping at each required level. Felt like hours. My sense of time was totally off. My legs were cramping, and my teeth were chattering, but I couldn't tell if it was from cold or panic. At 20 feet during our longest safety stop, I remember looking down again, just briefly, and seeing something move at the edge of my vision. Far below, maybe 150 feet down now. A dark shape, humanoid, just watching. I blinked. It was gone. We surfaced slowly, broke the water with a hiss of exhale. I don't remember climbing back onto the boat. Just the sudden brightness of the sky, the smell of diesel, and the weight of the tank finally off my back. I sat there, hunched forward, spitting out seawater and bile. Mark sat next to me, silent. He knew something had happened. I eventually told him what I'd seen. The diver, the gear panic, the shape below. He nodded once, then said what I already knew. Narcosis. It happens. Especially on dives that deep, especially if conditions line up just right. CO2 buildup, pressure, stress, even dehydration. He'd seen it before. Not just confusion, but full-blown hallucinations. Phantom diverse sounds, movements that never happened. The mind plays tricks at depth. I understood that. I'd read the studies, sat through the lectures. Narcosis wasn't uncommon. Still, it doesn't explain how real it felt. How familiar that figure seemed, even though I couldn't see a face. Or why the wave was exactly like mine, mirrored perfectly. It doesn't explain why I still feel like I wasn't alone down there. Not in the metaphorical sense, but in the real, physical one. Like something watched us from the caves. Like something wanted me to follow. I haven't done a dive that deep since. I still dive, but I stay above 100 feet. I triple-check my gases. I watch for signs of narcosis in myself like a hawk. And still, sometimes when I'm underwater and alone for a few seconds too long, I feel it again, that presence in the distance. That blank face. That slow wave. Waiting. Maybe it was just narcosis. Maybe I imagined everything. But in all the dives I've done since, nothing has ever come close to how real that moment felt. And whatever I saw down there, real or not, I don't want to see it again.